All right, good morning. So what we're going to do is we're going to start drawing. We're going to do that using basic shapes. Now, basic shapes are something that maybe you've learned in the past, but again, as we start the new year, we're going to review some of the stuff that we learned even last year. And those of you who did not learn this, that's okay too. It'll be a fine point to start. So to begin with that, I'm going to go ahead and disappear my face here. So I'll see you in a little bit. Just close that. And let's go ahead and just look at the quick presentation we're going to do with a little bit of drawing and talk about that. So we're going to talk about how to start drawing using basic shapes, or I should call them simple shapes, basic shapes, and we're going to be using geometrics. We'll get to that. So using a few simple geometric shapes, we can break down a complex image into a manageable design. So if you think about it, breaking something down into what's easier is very smart. Okay, it's a simple step, and a lot of people get confused. They see the end result and they want to jump right to that end result. I mean, it's just like if we were cooking. If I look at someone cooking something, I say, "Oh my gosh, that cake's amazing. How could you do that? I could never do that." Well, if you just start at the first step and you follow the steps, you would end up with the same cake. It might not come out quite it might not look as good as the cake that you see, but it would taste just the same and it would be the same cake. So again, that's kind of what our goal is. Some of you are not going to become the most realistic drawers in the world, but you will have a grasp of drawing to the point where we can continue building upon that, and you'll become quite incredible drawers. So what are basic shapes? Basic shapes are simple two-dimensional objects. These contain area, but not volume. So area, if you haven't learned this yet in math or science, we have length times width or base here. So that means that this object is a flat area. Okay, so if I said, hey guys, come over to my pool, and you came over to my house and I just had a blue square painted on the floor, or like a blue, inch of water, that would still have volume, but a very small amount, that would just be a shape. If I said, hey, jump off the diving board into the pool, and it was just the color blue on the floor, there's no volume. You wouldn't be able to jump into the pool. Okay, so area would be more like a flat square that is made from construction paper on the floor. Now, volume actually pertains to the pool itself. Volume is like if I go to the pool and I jump off the high dive and I land into, for example, like I used to go to Valley View Pool when I was a kid, and they have the deep end with the high dive. Well, when I jump in, I'm not going to jump in and splat right here on this flat square. I'm going to jump in and go down into the water because the water has depth. So again, when you say, hey, how deep is the water? That pertains to the depth. All right. So volume means it is three-dimensional, 3D, but we're going to be using area. We're going to be using shapes. So shapes are flat, and forms have volume. They're called forms, and we'll get to those in another lesson. Shape is an element of art, as is form. And some of you might remember elements of art from last year. Some of you may not, and that's okay. We're going to talk about that. So these are the 7 elements of art, and we will definitely talk about these in depth this year. These are what make art. So we have line, shape, form, space, texture, value, color. These things create the artwork we look at. And again, we will talk about every one of these throughout our lessons. The basic shapes are specifically geometric ones here that we're talking about are circles, triangles, and squares. Now, sometimes you'll see different ideas of what belongs in this list, and you'll see something like a rectangle. Well, a rectangle is just 2 squares, so I like to leave it off the list. Now, all of these are editable. So if we take our circle and we turn it into an oval, that's okay. It's still that basic shape that started as a circle. So everything we can think of that we want to draw is going to start as a circle, a triangle, or a square. Go ahead and try to draw this elephant, just as you see it right now. So what I want you to do is you can pause this if it's a video. If we're doing this live, I'm going to give you 10 minutes. So what you're going to do is you're simply going to wait here. You are going to draw for 10 minutes, and then you are going to check back in with me. So go ahead and do that now. 10 minutes, give it your best shot. Freehand drawing, no tracing, and let's see what you got. If you didn't hit pause, you need to hit pause because I'm going to continue on. I'm not going to wait 10 minutes. Now, let's go forward. Most of them probably didn't come out too good. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just saying that some of you maybe did a really good job. Some of you maybe had really good success and like drawing, drawn before, and you have a really good, what people say, eye for design. That eye for design means that you break things apart in your brain and you can see them as basic shapes, or you can see the angles of lines and copy them, repeat them. Most of us, though, weren't trained to do that, and we haven't done that. So that's what I'm going to train your brain to do. I'm going to rewire it. So what happened with most of you is you probably bit off more than you can chew. And that means you tried to draw the entire elephant in the first step, and it just, maybe you did your best, but it just doesn't look right. So let's break it down into steps. Step one is simply look at the object you're trying to draw. And I know this sounds ridiculous, this sounds silly, but most people don't even look at what they're trying to draw. They draw what's from their memory. And your memory, your brain, is a trickster. It will change what you think you're supposed to be seeing. And again, we want to break it down into what we think we don't want to break it. We don't want to draw what we think we see. We want to draw what we do see. And the easiest way to do that is to take the actual image here and break it into simple shapes. So if this was something that I was trying to draw and I had a printout of it, I would draw directly on top of the image with like a red pen. If it was something digital, we can do that with layers, and I'll show you how to do that in a different lesson. So for now, let's look at the basic large geometric shapes that we feel are the core of the elephant. And that's going to be these three simple circles. Now the three circles are all different sizes. That brings us to ratio. That's a really important thing. Ratios allow us to look at one object, such as a small circle, and say, hey, how many of these would fit inside of this one? Or how close does this circle cut in to this circle, which is about halfway. This one's not halfway. And that allows us to know how the ratio, how the size of the elephant, how to space things out. And a lot of you, if you look at your drawing that you did previously, you'll notice things like maybe the trunk and the foot are too close, or maybe the ear to the distance of the elephant's back is way larger or less, or maybe the eye is in the wrong spot. And all of these things can be solved by doing it in this method. So start with three basic shapes for the elephant. And again, as you draw other things, it won't always be three basic shapes. I just like to start at a couple of the largest basic shapes so that I can reference every other design off of it, every other angle and ratio. Add more of the basic shapes and modify them throughout. So again, as we do this, we can measure the negative space, that's the space in between where there's not a drawing, and we can just start looking at those things. And we're building. Again, don't rush. Don't try to draw the details. We're not doing any details. There's no eyeball. Eye's the very last thing. The lines on the trunk and the ear, those are the last things we should be worrying about. Continue throughout the details. Once we have all the shape, it looks pretty much like the outline of where the elephant would go. Then we can move to the interior parts of the elephant, such as the ear, things like the lines and the eye. Again, if you went in and out of the eye as one of the very first things, you were doing it wrong. So again, we have things like the little toenails here, things like that. And again, if we continue, we should end up at our elephant. Now, I'm not saying this is a quick fix. I'm not saying most of you are going to be like, oh, Mr. Hedges, I watched your, PowerPoint here, and now I know how to do it perfectly. Absolutely not. This is something we're going to build on every single lesson. But this is the very basics for how to start drawing. And again, as long as we're not over here in the no column and we're moving toward the yes column, we are in the correct direction. And that's what we need to do. So, with that being said, we will be starting our DoD projects. That's our daily observational drawings, where you are going to be drawing something that you select. I will start with some files, and I'm going to show you how to get started with that digitally in the coming lesson.